Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. And today we're going to be talking about how artists get into galleries. Let's get right into it. Art starts out in studios. So the first thing, whenever I'm dealing with students and they come to me for the first time, I always ask them, where are you making your paintings, right? Do you have a space that's designated just for your artwork, right? So it's first important to designate where that space is going to be. Artists make stuff and refine their voice in these places called studios. It's a place you go and just make stuff consistently, right? And that word consistent is going to come up a lot as well because it's going to be very important to have a strong and cohesive body of work, right? People want to see that body of work, not 3 paintings, but 30 paintings, and be able to think, oh, this is made by Jeremiah Polachek, right? They want to be able to have some cohesive line of thought that can be going through all the different paintings, right? So you're thinking conceptually a little bit, but you're also thinking about production and creating stuff in your studio. It's also important to know there should be a good amount of work. Like I said before, you're not going to you're not going to be able to do much if you just have 3 or 4 paintings. You're going to need 30 or 40 paintings just to begin with, right? So there should be a good amount of works so these works can go out into the world and kind of percolate in different areas, right? Production should be consistent. Think of your art making process as something you just kind of consistently do. A lot of times people think that you have to make paintings only when you're like divinely inspired or something like this. But in reality, you can just get into a production mode and creating can become part of your life and how you create money too, right? So it is part of how you produce. So once you make all your stuff, it's all basically made into a portfolio, right? And what we call these things now are pretty much PDFs, right? So a curator might ask for your PDF or a collector might ask for your PDF or something like that. But you're going to have your best works well curated. Don't throw everything into them. That's what I have a tendency to do. But have a well curated portfolio of like 12 pieces of your best pieces. And in this portfolio, you can include like a biography if you want. You can include an artist statement, or you can separate these things and have them just be 2 or 3 different PDFs that you send out, right? The benefits of having just the work in the PDF, I suppose, are is that it's just, white background and the paintings. Don't put a bunch of junk and garbage into the PDFs, just the title, the medium, when it was made, the size, these sort of things. They don't want to know anything else, right? So put that in your statement or somewhere else. But create these PDFs that is a curated selection of your work, and these can be sent to different people, right? So you've worked on the stuff in your studio. Now you've got a curated PDF of images of it, right? Now you're going to want to build some sort of network. And I hate this word networking, especially as it applies to the art world. But there's really not a better way to say it. And so you go to openings and you talk to people. And again, why I always did this because I'm interested in seeing art, right? So if you're interested in seeing art, you should just be going to galleries anyway and talking to people. Try not to be weird. I guess I put that down there as well because it's like if you're going there with the intentions of just trying to network and how can I leverage this situation to get into this gallery and this sort of stuff, I don't think it's going to work. And you'll probably come off as being insincere. I don't know. Maybe it does work for some people and you can plot like that. But just go to openings and talk to people, be part of a community that's making things, and build relationships and be interested in what's happening, essentially, right? If you're making art, I imagine you're probably interested in art and other ideas that other people are working with. I hope, right? So you can have some social media accounts. How you deal with social media, I'll get into a little bit later. But have a curated portfolio of your work on an Instagram account solely devoted to your artwork, right? So this means it's not a place for pictures of you with your cat, although, maybe 1 in 15 pictures or something like that. A picture of you isn't terrible, but you don't need a ton of them, right? You don't even need a ton of them with your paintings necessarily. Just let the paintings speak for themselves. White background, show all the edges of the painting to give and do the same thing, size and Medium and these sorts of things, right? And the reason why Instagram's important, because like basically, let's face it, if somebody hears about you, they'll probably ask, oh, what's their Instagram, right? And if you do have an opportunity to get to the level where you're showing at art fairs and these sorts of things, like international art fairs, not like a local farmers market type of situation, but or actually for both, even for the local farmers market situation, just having your cards with a QR code to your Instagram account where somebody can see a portfolio of all your works. That's going to be an important thing to have as well. So you got the PDF thing you're sending out to people when they ask for it, but you got Instagram available too. And again, you're using this in a way that just shows your artwork. Don't turn off your likes. And just don't worry about likes at all, these sorts of things. Just focus on showing your work in the best light possible. And the size of your following doesn't really matter that much in terms of like big art world type of shows. I know all sorts of very well-known painters that have less than like 5,000 followers on Instagram, and they're making paintings that sell for $40,000 and $50,000 each, right? So like the size of your following, it might seem like it matters a lot, and I'll get into why it matters if you choose a route more devoted to Instagram and direct sales later. But overall, when we're talking about general trajectory of artist in his studio to gallery, Instagram isn't as important in terms of following size. It's important in terms of being a portfolio, right? Do stuff for other people, right? So provide mentorship to other people. This gives you, more opportunity for exposure and networking and these sorts of things. But it also just kind of shares what you've learned with other people that want to learn it too, right? So that's kind of what I do. In my own practice, I try to be pretty giving as a teacher to like help other people, because I know I was a kid growing up in North Dakota, and luckily I was in a family that supported the arts and these sorts of things, but a lot of my relationship with the art world came through the library and looking at artist books and these sorts of things, right? So I do think it's important just to do stuff for other people, and that helps you be seen, and just like you're a person. You're not just like up in your studio all by yourself doing your thing. You're the genius by yourself, right? But you're also just kind of like, oh, this is how you mix linseed oil with your oil paint and stuff like that. Like you can be humble and still do those sort of things, and I think that it also will help you, integrate into places like local artist cooperatives, right? So if you're like teaching a class, all of a sudden you start getting to know all the other people at this local art co-op as well. And that helps your opportunities to maybe be in a group show or whatever, right? And again, you don't have to approach these things as some sort of evil plot. It's like helping people, talking to other people, being interested in art, right? They're not exactly these complicated ideas. And when your friends have shows, show up to their shows. Go look at their stuff. Don't just walk into the show and eat the cheese. Like actually look at the work. Don't ask them about the work, because nobody wants to talk about their work at their opening. But just go and be like, oh, this looks cool, right? Be a normal human. All right, so you can identify some different entry points into the gallery system when we're talking about a trajectory into the typical gallery world. And these would include, like I just talked about, these artist co-op type places or group shows a lot of times. So look if you have some sort of artist-run space or an artist collective or something like that that's doing a group show, call for entries, these types of things. Just keep an eye out, follow them on Instagram, and show up to their stuff, and submit your work to their open calls and these sorts of places. Generally, in terms of getting your stuff into galleries, there used to be this notion, and I knew people that did this actually, and were successful at it, believe it or not. But they would have just a portfolio of their work, physical works in a portfolio, and go around to different galleries showing these different works. This is, a long time ago, 30 years ago, probably, that they were doing this, 30 or 40 years ago that they were doing this. And then there used to be this whole system with slides, and then they'd be like, okay, we'll take a look at your slides, and you'd send this sheet of slides to them. and they'd look at your work on slides. But now when you pitch to galleries, they get so many emails, and like I bet the majority of them are just total garbage in terms of like they're probably not even artists. They're probably scammers or some sort of stuff. And so unfortunately, just like sending a blind PDF to a gallery and like, hey, check out my stuff, that's probably not going to get you anywhere, and it might annoy them. Showing up to the gallery is definitely probably going to annoy them, and pitching your work. But you can just find the gallery locally that does your kind of stuff that you're into, right? If there's whatever that option is, and again, I'm trying to be as open as possible, whereas, I come from a small town as well, and they have their own co-op in that town too, Bismarck, North Dakota. They also have their own artist co-op that does shows and these sorts of things, right? So you can find these in smaller towns. They don't have to be these huge, big, fancy, collectives or these sort of things, right? And you find them, and they can often be an entry point into getting more exposure, which can lead to you getting your own big solo show, right? So you're in artist co-op, and the gallerists come through, and they're like, this Jeremiah Polachek guy, these look pretty interesting, and there's a lot of them. I feel like I think I could do something with these. I could maybe try them out and, contact a couple collectors that I know that are into this sort of thing and see if they want to buy it, and then maybe I can, this is how they're thinking, right? And they get 50% of everything, and everybody's like, what? That's crazy. But a good gallerist will do a lot of work as well. So it isn't something to worry about if they're taking 50% of sales, if they can raise the price of your work considerably more than that, right? So I'm represented by Giampietro Gallery in Connecticut, and that relationship has been awesome. And it's also just kind of like a personal relationship that you develop with somebody that likes your work, and you communicate and keep them up to date with new stuff that you're creating and these sorts of things. However, oftentimes, when I was younger, I would think of as gallery representation as being like the golden ticket, and we got this, everything's cool now, and it still requires a lot of work, even if you are a represented artist, right? So this is generally good, but sometimes can make artists feel like they're reproducing the same thing for the market. So the reality of being represented by a gallerist or a gallery is often linked to having a certain vision, right? Like I was talking about before, a certain consistent vision, because collectors want to see consistency in that vision as well. And they also kind of want to see that you're really devoted to this idea, that you're not just like making paintings that are cool because airbrushing is cool now or whatever. They want to see some consistency in that way as well. And so sometimes artists can feel kind of constrained by this, and they become represented and they get everything they want, but then they're like, wait a minute, am I just making endless reproductions of what I did? And so hopefully that's why it's so important, and I talk about this with students as well, that's why it's so important that you really like what you're doing. You should really care about these ideas that you want to communicate to the world, and it's not just about making something that looks cool, it's about exploring something that can enhance your life and hopefully enhance others as well in the way they look at the world, right? So you're sharing something with the world. Think about it. Think about what you want it to be. Now, at a certain level, you're going to get contact, if all this trajectory goes right, this particular one that I'm talking about, museum curators are going to start being interested in your stuff and thinking it's cool, and they're going to start putting your work into their shows and collections. Believe it or not, I've been in major museum shows. I've been in the Pompidou. I've been in Schern Kunsthalle. Like, I somehow managed up, that could be another entire video, but I somehow weaseled my way in to these shows, and it was essentially, it's a long story about people I knew, but it came through essentially social media. promoting my work and getting the attention of a curator in France who put me into this show called Paparazzi. So you can look it up. Anyway, when you get into a museum show, it kind of gives an artist a certain level of prestige or something, like, oh, this person's shown here. And so you can kind of jump certain steps if you get into these museum shows and these sort of things. And people like it. If a collector is looking at an artist, they can see that line and they're like, oh, wow, they thought he was good, so he must be good, right? So oftentimes artists that reach this level, I'm definitely nowhere near this level, that work with museums consistently, they start getting institutional funding. So they start getting these big grants to create these big projects and these sorts of things. And famous artists will begin spending more time preparing and working on grants in addition to holding their own solo shows as well. So it becomes kind of this balancing act between I'm making art, but now I'm also kind of producing work for this grant that I got as well. So they have to manage those two things, right? Sometimes there's such a demand for their work that an artist will hire assistants to start making it for them. And of course, in this beautiful plate, we have Jeff Koons with a pig, which was probably created in some souvenir shop or something. He's a well-known artist for paying other artists to make his work. But a lot of artists, they have to juggle administrative stuff. They have to do taxes. They have to produce work. They have to write stuff about their work. They have to manage doing interviews and visiting artist assignments and all these sorts of things. And they've got to consistently make paintings. And sometimes these are like physically really big paintings, right? They're big things with stretchers that are, 3 meters by 3 meters. And the painting itself, before there's any paint on it, is worth $1,000 just of materials for like aluminum frames and all this sort of stuff, right? So an artist often will hire assistants to help with this kind of production. And at this level, when they're like a very serious art star level artist, they begin employing more and more people. Here we have Ai Weiwei. And he's got hundreds of people that work for him on these projects that he's producing. Here we've got all these like tiny little ceramic sunflowers that each single one is hand painted, and he filled this entire exhibition full of them. So you can see at a certain level, artists become like a business, right? They're a business. They're employing people. They've got assistants. They've got people doing administrative work, and this is a very high level artist at this point, right? These are the Michael Jordans. So collectors, how do they play a role in all this? Collectors help establish an artist's market value. And sometimes artists will maintain, a direct contact with the person they're buying from, but generally galleries want to kind of fill this role. And a lot of times you'd be surprised, some of these big galleries, they subsist off of a very, very small group of collectors. We're talking maybe 12 people or 20 people, or really a small amount of people. And they can be buying up insane amounts of work. And that gives the gallery the ability to pay their rent, right? In these prestigious locations, when you think about how can they have such a huge place? And like, oh, that's how, right? Auction houses are important indicators. So at a certain point, like your work starts going into the secondary market. And so auction houses, maybe somebody bought your painting and they're going to resell it. Or a gallery is putting your work into an auction house. So what your work sells for at a major auction can also become a benchmark for the value of that work, right? Now, I've talked about kind of the traditional art worldy, kind of high elite art worldy sort of approach to getting into galleries, right? And there are some alternate routes I just wanted to touch upon for a second. And I think it's important to think about because there's two different worlds here, and a lot of times artists, especially online, that find my content online, they don't know about the gallery world that I just talked about, and they're more into the Instagram world and how they can get big on Instagram, right? And so Instagram artists are something different than a represented artist. And they subsist more on direct sales to buyers, right? So they're the people that are selling the work. They're the people packaging it and getting it to the people that want to buy it, right? And they often play into, the same things you'd imagine, like figuring out how the algorithm works, or a lot of times they'll just pay for ads and run ads, and then they'll figure out how much do I make selling these prints or whatever I'm selling. Am I making money on these things? Okay, well, we can run more ads and I can make more prints or whatever, right? So this is a different way of thinking and a different way of producing, and a lot of times artists like this because they have a lot more autonomy. Drawbacks. A major drawback is that you're probably not going to be able to demand a lot of money for your work, like serious money for your work, $40,000, $60,000 for a painting, through building your reputation solely on Instagram, right? There's probably going to be a topping out where the demand for your work is met, right? And then how much is that painting worth? Is it worth $200 or $2,000, right? And who's maintaining the value of that work? If it's not being sold at an auction house or anything like that, it's just going out there into the world. For that reason, I don't have, I have thousands of paintings, which is probably another problem in and of itself. I have too much work. But at the same time, you can think about, I don't put my stuff on the internet. I don't have it all for sale. I have stuff available through Artsy, through my gallery, right? And I have pieces in here that I have on the walls in this little vintage shop that I'm also teaching painting in, right? But when people ask, I actually maintain my prices. I don't say like, okay, this is $200 or whatever. These are like, $2,000 to $5,000 paintings that I have on the wall in the space. So yeah, and I've sold a couple of them, right? So there are some weird hybrids. One of them would be Cause, and these are artists that can find some balance between Instagram fame and institutional support of some sort. Sometimes, people hate on Cause a lot, but I always thought I don't understand the big deal with him or the hate for him, to be honest, in a lot of ways. I mean, he's a graffiti artist and he started making toys and sculptures and stuff that are cool, so whatever. And I know he's known for buying a lot of work too, so yeah, it seems like a good guy. But what he represents is kind of odd, and I think it might be good for students to understand that somebody like Cause is kind of a unicorn type figure, that somebody that can kind of have these big institutional exhibitions and these sorts of things, while also being this famous Instagram artist who's selling, toys in some ways that are accessible to anybody, right? So be aware that the multiple paths do exist. The first thing and the most important thing is just to prioritize your studio time. Make sure you have time to get into the studio and make it consistent so you can make stuff, right? Build your portfolio, create your online presence from that portfolio, right? Engage with your community, go to local exhibitions, teach at local cooperatives, help out with other people, these sort of things, talk about art, be interested in other art that you're seeing, and figure out if you want to be more of an artist that is going to be selling directly to people. Do you see yourself as somebody that's going to be in galleries? Are you more interested in that model? And figure out what type of artist you want to be and your own approach to it. And I hope, if you follow this path, I wish you all the best of luck, of course. It's not easy, and I'm not acting like I'm some art star either, right? I've got some successes somehow throughout time. I think probably just through sheer determination and the fact that I'm just consistently always producing, and I just can't stop, right? So I think that can be another thing too. When you get down, just keep going and keep chugging along. And because if anything else, creating this work should be something that enriches you and your life as well. So thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, please. It helps out the channel. And I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.